All right. So should I pass to Angela and then you can popcorn to somebody?
Hey, hi, I'm Angela Sadowski. I teach psychology. I've been at Chafee full-time since 2001. So it's been quite a while. I also coordinate anthropology, psychology, social science, and sociology. And psychology is a huge field. Lots of students super interested in majoring in psychology. So we have a lot of resources for our psychology students. And I'll pass it to Joshua.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Josh Stapleton. I am the associate professor of EMS, Emergency Medical Services, and I also teach in the fire technology program with my counterpart, Jim Sloan. Part-time with the college for 4 years, and just last August was fortunate enough to come on board full-time. So getting my feet definitely wet in that arena. And I have the unique perspective in that I still am also a full-time fire captain and practicing paramedic in the region here in Rancho Cucamonga, and have been doing so actually in this field since 1994, since I'm sure long before many of our student guests were even born. So I'm super excited about this opportunity to be a part of this panel discussion. And Dr. Moronez, I'll pass it over to you.
Hey folks, how is everyone? I'm Dr. Moronez. I'm in the sociology department and my emphasis is social justice. I actually worked at Chafee as a part-time research analyst in the Chino campus. It's called the Old Bank Building. So I was there running some data, looking at our CTE programs, which are programs that are based on the career technical training. But this is my first full year as a full-time faculty at Chafee College, and I'm just loving being here with you all. So thank you.
Okay. Do any of the students, would any of you like to share anything that you'd like to get out of this meeting, or anything that you are excited about hearing today? You can either unmute your mic if you feel like sharing or type into the chat box. Yes, I see Marwa. Would you like to start us off, please?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you all so much for being here today. I really appreciate this forum. I'm a political science major, so I'm hopefully going to go to law school in the future, and I'm very interested in public service. So I'm very interested to see what kind of information I can get on that sense and apply it to my studies and my research in the future. So I'm very honored to be here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing that. I will also send you, because you're one of my students, so I know your email and everything, but I can send you a link to a panel that we did in the past as well with Pak Tang, who's in political science, and he did a panel event where he talks about some of the things you're talking about as well, so you can review that too. So there's an extra resource I'll send you.
Thank you so much for that.
I see James. James says, looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say and getting all the information you have to offer. Pleasure to meet you all. Ramon says, just looking to learn about some of the services available to us. I am currently a psych major with a fire background. Wow. You are here at the perfect location, James. Thank you for joining us. Right. I don't see any more hands up. What I'd like to do first is share my screen. Oh, Samantha, yes. Samantha says, hi, I'm an admin for criminal justice major, and I originally started my journey here as undecided, and I'm excited to learn more about the social justice side, as I've been really leaning towards that major when I transfer to Cal State LA in the fall. Excellent. Excellent. I want to show you all something to start. So I do teach anthropology. I'm also the ACC coordinator for this division, which is called public Public Service Culture and Society. It's a mouthful. And I wanted to show this form to you, and I'll also copy and paste this into the text box. But if afterwards you feel like I would love to meet with a faculty member who's directly in my major, this is a really good step to take, where basically you would end up following these 1 through 4. You would send an email. It would prompt you to fill out this very short form, and you send an email. It goes to Wendy Whitney, who is our career counselor, as well as Nicole Barbary. She's a psychology professor, and they would help match you up with somebody that's in your career field. And the really great thing about this program is that it can provide a sort of mentoring opportunity where you can have a great relationship with a faculty member, where they can help give you ideas about good schools to apply for, ideas about, just the application process or internship information, all of that kind of stuff. So it can be a really, really fantastic support for you. Another thing I tell my students is this is great as well, because once you meet with a faculty member several times, they get to know you outside of the classroom. They get to see a different side of your personality. So that can be really helpful if you do need something like a letter of recommendation when you are applying. So take advantage of this opportunity, and I'll put this link in the chat box for you all now so that you can have that for later in case there's interest there. 1 second. All right, so there's the link to that community advising form. And then I should have actually kept my screen up. Let's go to this one. So I'm also going to share the link to PCS, and I'll copy and paste this for you as well. But again, PCS stands for Public Service, Culture, and Society. And there are a whole bunch of different majors, as you can see along the side. There might even be some that you've never heard of. We frequently, as you can see in the chat box, have students who are double majors or minors. So this might be something that you want to check out to see what the other kind of related majors are for you, and then see so they mentioned, are you empathetic, insightful, or an intellectual? So it can give you ideas about this field and some of the kind of commonalities, I would say. So I will copy and paste that for you as well. There we go. Okay, and I have some questions for our panelists. And so they'll answer these questions, and then at the end of the session, we can open this up to the students and see what other amazing questions you have to answer our panelists. Okay, sound good? So my first question is, why is public service important to you? And feel free to unmic whoever would like to go first.
Well, I mean, I'll just start, I guess. Being from a psychology background, I also have my social work degree. So I have a master's in psych and a master's in social work. And those two professions are really a lot about public service. I mean, especially social work. And so I don't know, I've always been drawn to a helping profession. Psychology, clinical psychology in particular, is a helping profession, but psychology in general is helping us understand other people, how they think, feel, and behave. And certainly, I've just always been drawn to that. And I think that the skill sets, I'm speaking in particular to my profession, psychology, the skill set you learn in psychology can be applied to any career, to really anything that you decide to do. If you better understand how people think, feel, and behave, you can be a success if you're in nursing, if you're in political science, if you're a politician, if you if you work in sales, if you're a manager, really any profession that you do, if you have kind of a psych background, I think that that's extremely helpful. So some of us are just more inclined to a helping profession and to a service profession than others. And if those in this panel are students who feel that way, who feel like you want to make a difference and help people, then you're in the right community here at Chaffey College.
I'll jump in and dovetail on that. Teaching in the emergency medical services program and the fire technology program obviously fell into that because that's been the area that I've spent my career in for almost 30 years now. For me, it wasn't my original plan, and I think it was, I'm not sure if, I think it was Marwa. Marwa, if I'm reading back through the notes correctly, you are looking, just trying to give me 1 second, just scrolling back. There was something that you said about interested in fire or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, you're a poli-sci major. That's right. Believe it or not, that's actually where I started my educational journey, was in the exact same place you're in. And here I am 30 years later, not a lawyer, but actually a firefighter and a paramedic. So you never know where your life journey is going to take you. For me personally, getting into international law and all of those things, that was something that highly intrigued me. But as a part-time job, I ended up on an ambulance as an emergency medical technician through a series of circumstances. And I was touched by the fact that I had, on any given day, the opportunity to make an impact in somebody else's life. And not saying that any of these other fields, these are all fields that we're discussing that you can do that in. But for me, it suited my personality, it suited my passions very well. And it has continued to suit me for almost 3 decades now. I think all of us, as we progress through our lives, we start recognizing our own mortality and the fact that there is going to come a point. I mean, if you think back maybe 4 or 5 generations ago, what do you really know about your great grandparents? Maybe not a lot. Maybe not. There's not a lot of stories. Maybe there are some where, you know, your great grandparent did something that was notable. And we call that a legacy. And a legacy is something that you leave behind after you are gone. For me, I've recognized now, after 30 years in this career, that my legacy may not be something, I may not have my name attached to a building at a college or to a training center at a fire department. But the legacy that in this field of public service I'm able to leave is I know and can recall certain benchmark patients that I have run on, or fires I have been on, or rescues I was on, where I was a part of a team that made a difference in somebody's life, that turned someone's life around from heading to demise and death to having more years on this planet. And so my reason for seeing public safety as important and public service is it is the opportunity to do something for another human that may go unsung. But in my mind, in my heart, in my legacy that I'm going to leave long after I'm gone, I'll know that I made an impact in somebody else's life. And that is the reason why I see public service as such an important thing.
Absolutely. I want to thank my 2 fellow panelists for their responses, because I think it's giving at least me like just a broader understanding of like my own sort of trajectory with public service. I started off as a child development major. So when I went to college, I thought that I wanted to work with little ones and toddlers and be elementary, or excuse me, a preschool teacher. That's what I first thought of when I went to college. I discovered the field of sociology, and it's a field that it's a field in which we're looking at society, the social structures of society, the systems, the institutions. And when we're looking at these systems and institutions, we have to consider the inequality, discrimination that's embedded in those systems. So when I was a college student, I thought to myself, I know I want to do something that's like bigger than myself, that can impact a lot of people. So I was drawn to sociology for that reason. I wanted to make the world a better place, really, since now that I was aware of all these inequalities in the world. So being in sort of the helping profession, as Angela sort of mentioned, that particular phrase was really important to me when I was going through college, and just thinking of the types of careers that I could have that would impact others was really important to me. So I've always done like community service type of things. When I was in high school, I I volunteered at a hospital in high school, and one of my favorite days was when I was on Christmas Day, when I would like help give Christmas gifts to the children in the children's ward. That was one of my favorite things to do. So I always liked just being around people and being able to serve people. So it's always just kind of been something that I've been drawn to.
Thank you all for sharing. My second question is, and some of you have kind of alluded to some of these things, so feel free to expand on them, but my second question is, in what ways or jobs have you been involved with public service, maybe outside of teaching?
I could start that one. So outside of teaching, that sort of relates to public service, is I was a domestic violence hotline advocate for a couple years, and I worked in a domestic violence shelter. People would call and need services. I would have to assess the type of service that they needed. Some people would call for reasons that didn't fit under the domestic violence shelter framework. Some folks would call with concerns about getting out of relationships that didn't quite have an emergency sort of response. And then there were plenty of calls which we received from folks who were in an emergency situation and needed to flee their home with their children immediately. So I worked in that field for a couple years, and I really enjoyed it. It was a way for me to, once again, help people. Specifically, our shelter was for women and children, but particularly help women and children in that way. So we'd get a phone call, assess the phone call, assess the level of danger, and then set up a plan to meet with the person and to get them into our shelter. They could stay up to 45 days in our shelter, and they and their children would be safe for the 45 days. We would sometimes have to find a transitional shelter for them, or we would create a safety plan with them in terms of how they were going to keep them and their children safe when they returned outside of the shelter. We worked with them with housing. We worked with them with employment. We worked with them on getting them CalFresh benefits or SNAP benefits and all those types of public assistance so that they could be self-sufficient when they left our shelter. So we would work in that, in that space. And for me, that was one of the most important jobs that I had. And it was also something that was a job that was life-saving. The lives of the women that I worked with, and also the lives of the children. So that's one of my most like favorite jobs and most impactful and meaningful jobs.
Okay, well, I guess I'll go next. I actually always knew that I was going to major in psychology. So I was one of the lucky ones that figured it out like in high school. And so my first volunteer experience was when I was 18. I worked for Options House, which was a runaway shelter. I grew up in Hollywood, California, and runaways in Hollywood are a really big thing. So I worked for Options House, which is kind of a little bit like what Jessica was saying, but it was helping runaways get the resources that they need. And mostly they were running away from abusive relationships at home with their families. And then I worked for AIDS Project LA, and I used to, this was back when, the AIDS epidemic was really big. So we would call AIDS patients and check up on them and make sure that they were doing okay. And if they had any needs like medication needs or counseling needs, we would assist them with that. And then I got my MSW and I became a social worker. So I did therapy, I did counseling. I actually sat in the room and helped individuals who came for counseling. The two populations I worked with were people, generally women who were withdrawing from drugs. So they were in drug rehab. And then I also worked with teenagers who were court ordered to come to counseling. So those were the two populations I worked with. And then most recently, when my son was in school, I volunteered at his school to assist teaching kids how to read. So different kids get different levels of support at home to be able to practice the skills of reading, which is fundamentally important to be successful in school. And so for the kids that weren't getting all of those resources at home, some of us parents would volunteer to practice and help kids learn how to read. That was my most recent helping experience.
I won't speak too long because I kind of talked about what I do already, but one of the neat things about the public safety aspect of public service and being in emergency medical services is there is a lot of opportunity to diversify. No single day is the same as the day before. And then there's always opportunities to kind of branch out and do some different things. So in my journey, I started on an ambulance as an emergency medical technician, moved my way up to paramedic through a paramedic program. I've also worked part-time at Loma Linda University in their operating room as an anesthesia technician, because that fell very much in line with the skill set that I had learned as an EMT. So I got to be right there next to the anesthesiologist during hundreds of surgeries, getting to learn and see all sorts of unique things. I've worked obviously for a couple of fire departments and now have taught at several different EMT and paramedic programs throughout the Inland Empire. And then of course been a part of numerous committees, programs. I'm actually in our fire department's pipes and drums band, as well as the pipes and drums for the State Professional Firefighters Association. So get to honor those who have fallen in the line of duty through that. So there are so many different avenues in the public safety side of public service to really diversify, enrich your own experience. I always tell my students, you get one ride on the merry-go-round. So this one chance you have at life, diversify and find those things that bring you joy and bring joy to other people and help other people. And that's one of the neat things about being in public service.
So you kind of hit on my next question, but I'm going to alter a little bit. So I just wanted to see, in terms of internships, do you feel like those are important for students to take advantage of? And if so, why do you think those are important for them to do while they're still doing their degree?
I'll springboard right into that one since I kind of started on it. So as I talked about with all of you and spoke to Mara about just a moment ago, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And we often, I changed majors 3 times. And consequently, I was on the 13-year plan for my bachelor's degree. It took me a while to actually figure out what I wanted to do. And a lot of that, we jump into college right out of high school at 18 years old. And my oldest boys, I have twins who are turning 21 this year, and they've really floundered a little bit trying to figure out what it is that they want to do with their life, because you are also, we are all evolving and developing and growing as human beings, but your 20s, those are some really formidable years that really kind of firm up what your belief system is, your value system, what you want to invest your time into. And so if you, as a student, jump into an educational plan that will lead to a certain career path, you may not know specifically what that career path is going to take, what road that's going to take you down, and whether that at the end of that road, that's going to be something that you gained that satisfaction through. And so putting yourself out there to do different internship programs gives you essentially, I'm sure all of us have been to a buffet before. And you go down the buffet line and you're like, oh, this looks good. Let me try a little bit of that. That looks good. Let me try a little bit of that. And I know your first trip down the buffet line, you take little bites of a lot of different things. And then the second trip back is where you literally go through and you go, okay, I really enjoyed that specific plate. That one wasn't so good. That one didn't taste, it looked better than it tasted. And your second trip down the line, that's where you focus on those things that you really enjoyed. And that's what you decide to fill your belly with. And internships very much are that same opportunity. The fire service doesn't have a whole lot of internship programs outside of local explorer programs. There are some internship programs in the ambulance field, but they're also limited. And I wish we're kind of working on trying to expand that a little bit, because for those who go to nursing school or to medical school, that is a part of your curriculum, is doing rotations through all the different units that you could be working in as a physician or as a nurse to help you decide where do you want to focus on. So for those of you who are who have those opportunities to participate in internship programs, I highly recommend take that first trip nice and slow down that buffet line the first time and taste everything that you can. Make that decision wisely then about where you want to invest your career for the next 30 to 40 years after that.
Well, I'll jump in and say, in general, I think internships are a great idea. But like Josh said, not every profession actually affords itself to that opportunity. For example, in psychology, there aren't really internship opportunities. In psychology, in order to actually, especially if you want to do clinical work, you really have to have a bachelor's or a master's degree before you have the opportunity to do some of that. However, volunteer work is available all the time to everyone. And so I always encourage my students who are interested in social work or in psychology to say, you know, you probably aren't going to find internships in my field, but you can always find volunteer experiences. And so I can't really speak to some of the other majors in this particular community. Some of them may have more internship opportunities, but in psychology, you can always do that volunteer work. And I always think if you want to work with people, then do some kind of internship in which you're working with people to see if you really like it, if you really enjoy it. You know, people say, oh, in psychology, I want to work with teenagers. Well, work with teenagers and find out, because it may be that you don't, right? Find out before you go all the way to get your master's or PhD, if there's a specific population or group of people that you really want to work with. So internships are important in some fields and in some professions, and they certainly, you know, there are opportunities, but in other fields and professions, there really aren't those opportunities. So you have to make your own opportunities, for example, by doing volunteer work, or by doing research, or by, hanging around people and joining clubs. We have a site club, for example, and I always say, hey, you know what, join the site club so you can learn about different professions, different opportunities. And so if you don't have an internship opportunity, that shouldn't discourage you. You should find other ways to immerse yourself in the knowledge of what that profession would be like.
Absolutely. I agree with my co-panelist here. If there is an internship, yes, absolutely try that. If there isn't, make the opportunity to do volunteer work. And, I think population is really important. Like Professor Sadowski mentioned, if you're interested in working in with senior citizens, right, then maybe you want to try to get a volunteer opportunity on Meals on Wheels through the YWCA wings. And then you could help deliver meals to seniors in that way. Or it also can allow you to control the time. Like if you have a small commitment, or maybe 10 hours a week or 5 hours a week, dip your foot in it, see if you like it, right? See if you like the water. So I think that's really important to know that if there is an internship opportunities, then go for the volunteer opportunities. It will help you understand more about yourself. It's that buffet line that Professor Stapleton's talking about. You get to see if you like it, if you don't like it. Some things you may not be able to find out is the structure or the admin or sort of what happens at that level. But I think that just being able to get a lay of the land is really important while you're getting your degree. So I would look for those opportunities. I can think of some off the top of my head in terms of volunteer work for sociology. So if interested, let me know, and then I could help you brainstorm with that.
Yes, thank you for sharing all those. And I think our panelists have hit on a really important point that I, in my career background, would agree with as well. In that, when Professor Stapleton's talking about this buffet line, taking opportunities, whether they're paid, unpaid, whether it's field work, they help you not only to learn about what you enjoy, but they help you to see what you don't like or what is not for you. And that can be so important because you don't always know. When I was in undergraduate and graduate school, I did a variety of different things in anthropology, and I did 2 different museum internships at different locations. One was in Santa Barbara, one was in New Mexico, and they were very different. Where the first one, I was basically cataloging artifacts, and I was all by myself in a room, just writing things up. And it was not for me. I'm a really social person, and just sitting all by myself in a room, just typing something up was not fun. The second one that I did, at first they had me in the library cataloging books, and then they said, hey, do you want to help create some of these exhibitions? And I thought, oh, that sounds really fun. But then I realized I don't have that eye for detail. They're like, did you use a level? And I'm like, we have a level, I loved leading people around the museum and giving the tours and talking about the topics. But it was just like, I kind of realized from those 2 unpaid internships, like that wasn't for me, that I didn't want to be in the museum field, but I loved it. I love going to museums, but I just knew that wasn't where I wanted to put my career. So those can be powerful ways for you to kind of explore and to see what you're interested in. My next question for everyone is, why do you think it's important to understand culture and or society in the workforce?
I could start that one. So we live in a very diverse society. So in terms of understanding the culture that we have, and our society is, different than other societies, our culture is different from other cultures, right? So understanding not just like the dominant culture of society, but also like what other, cultures experience, and people coming from different ethnic racial backgrounds, different socioeconomic status or social class. Understanding where people come from is so vital when working in a public service field. So I think it's important that we understand the diversity of individuals, that we're inclusive with individuals, that we're making sure that we're being sensitive and just asking individuals like what they need, not speaking for other people, trying to gather like the knowledge that we have about people and asking people what they need. Additionally, I think with culture and society, we need to continue to just remain inclusive and just consider that people's experiences are different from our own, even if we do grow up in the same culture, same like dominant culture, but people's experiences are different. So I think having that mindset when you work with people in general is so important, because you can very easily make somebody feel unwelcomed by certain things that we may be considered to be like our cultural norms. And if it's different from their own, then they might feel very unwelcome with working with you, or they might just feel like maybe even unsafe. So I think it's just important for people to know like where we're coming from, but also to know where they're coming from too. And our society just so diverse. We're so diverse in terms of gender identity, diverse when it comes to sexuality, diverse in all these different ways. So it is important to keep diversity in mind when you're working with folks, because like I said, you want to make sure that you're welcoming folks, that you're continuing to provide a workforce and a workplace that makes people feel comfortable. So I think that's why that we need to understand culture and society, and also to look at our own socialization process. Maybe the way that we were socialized is just different from other people. I mean, I teach sociology. One of my favorite topics is our socialization chapter. And, I find out all these different things about the way that people grew up within their own families that are just different from mine. So I think the more we keep that in mind, the better we can serve others in public service.
I mean, I don't think you're going to get a better answer than from a sociologist. like everything she said, all of that. I mean, right? Because that's what sociology looks at. I'll just share that, you know, from my background, we're working with people and people are individuals, right? Psychology looks at people as individuals. And so, you know, to better be able to help and understand them, to be able to assist them, you have to be culturally sensitive. We live in Southern California. It's one of the most diverse places on earth. And so when you choose this profession, you already have some level of insight and some level of understanding about the fact that we are all different. We all have different needs. And so to be able to help people and to communicate with people, you need to be very sensitive to that, very cognizant of that. But I think that that the previous answer was spot on.
And from the public safety side of public service, we work in a very unique environment in that the 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 workforce, they come into the workplace, which is a family of sorts, and they may eat lunch with them, they may not, they may eat at their desk or be doing their work, and then they go home to their family, to their culture, their safe place. In the public safety side of public service, on an ambulance, you spend 12 hours at a minimum, sometimes 24-hour shifts, sitting next to one person who is your partner that day. And you have to eat together, work together, run calls together, clean together, all of those things. And if you move on to a fire department, you do that for 24 hours a day, sometimes 48, sometimes 72 hours, sometimes 2-week stretches at a time, where you're with 2 to 4 other people who are your family, who you cook with, you clean with, you eat with, you train with, you run calls with. And so having that very inclusive mindset going into a career in this field is extremely important. It can make or break your success in public safety. And that is your ability to be inclusive of all backgrounds, personalities, character traits. And that's the reason why going into that mindset into the workplace is as important as it is because when somebody picks up the phone and calls 911, that call doesn't go through a filter to see if they socially or culturally match with who we are. We are expected in public safety to show up at their front door, and they are welcoming us in, complete strangers, because they expect that we are going to make their worst day better. And we have to walk in with no filters of, well, I'm going to be a little bit more cynical of this person or a little less caring or compassionate to this person because they don't fit my social norms. They don't look like me. They don't talk like me. They don't keep their house clean like me. Judgment and being prejudiced, there is no place for that in the public safety side of or in any public service. You are there to serve others. And so going into a career in this field with that mindset, that very inclusive, non-judgmental, we are all walking this planet together, trying to figure it out, and being able to embrace the fact that when we run on somebody as a public safety emergency medical services provider, someone who might be homeless, at their low, suffering from alcohol addiction, whatever other addiction it may be, I always tell my students, we have to recognize that every single one of us, all the way up to our college president, is just one bad decision away from ending up in that same place. Any one of us could have made a choice or a series of choices that has pressed us down a road that would have led us into that same place. And so recognizing that we are not any better than anybody else, our circumstances may be better. Our choices may have been more wisely executed or fortuitous, but bringing that empathy and that compassion to those that we care for in public service is crucial. And that really goes off of what Dr. Moronez was saying, is diversity, equity, inclusion, recognizing that we are all in this together is very, very important.
Thank you. These were really, really powerful answers. And I hope that some of this resonates with some of you students as you're thinking about careers and jobs and pathways. My last question for our panelists before I open it up to the students is, how can majoring in your field prepare a student for a variety of careers in the field of public service, culture, and society?
Well, I think I already mentioned that, so I'll just jump in really quickly. When you look at a lot of different fields, you'll see that one of the things that that is recommended is an AA in psychology or a bachelor's degree in psychology. So even something like law, marketing, sales, human resources, a whole bunch of ones that I talked about. Psychology is something that's preferred as one of the minors, or as something that you would obtain at the AA or the bachelor's degree level, even if you're not planning on going into psychology, because it is so versatile. I mean, it's the second most declared major at Chaffey College, and it is so versatile. I mean, the things that you learn in psychology can help you in any profession. I mean, I can't think of a profession that it doesn't help you with, to understand how people think and behave. And to be able to just have a better understanding about yourself and how you think and behave and what motivates you and what motivates others can be helpful in any profession that you choose. I mean, obviously, I'm a cheerleader for psychology and think that it's the best profession in the world, but I think that it's just so versatile in that if you want to go into anything else, having some background, even if you just take a class in psychology, I think is just a super helpful starting point, because in psychology, what we discuss is learning, memory, developmental issues, human developmental issues, personality, abnormal psychology, just general kind of things that, a lot of students when they come into psychology think are common sense, but they're common sense based on scientific research and methodology, and they help us just better understand ourselves and how to navigate the world. So I mean, in answering Allison's question, I think that having some background in psychology is helpful in almost any profession that you would choose. I mean, I don't know about the paramedic background, but I know that police officers have to take a certain number of classes in psychology and abnormal psychology and understanding mental illness, because they come in contact with people who are mentally ill, that they have to make quick decisions about whether that person is a danger. Should they be arrested? Should they go to a psych hospital? I mean, so many professions reach out and branch out from just having some kind of psychology background or a psychology class here or there. So I think it branches out to just about everything.
All right, I'll jump in on that one as well. So two things. One, going through an associate's program here at Chaffey College, we have the fire technology professional firefighter associate's degree pathway, which also leads down to the pathway through a program at Cal State Long Beach, Cal State Los Angeles, I'm sorry, with a bachelor's degree in fire science. So there is great value in, just as Angela said, learning about yourself. I know I learned so much about my value system and who I am as a person and who I wanted to become and to continue to become as a person through going through, especially some of the psychology classes that I went through as part of my bachelor's degree. We also, in the emergency medical services field, obviously deal with people with mental health issues. And in our field, we're even talking about our own mental health a lot more than we ever have before. And so what's unique about emergency medical technician and that pathway here through Chaffey College is it's one of the very few programs that you can literally do a 3-unit course one semester, a 7-unit course the next semester, and be out into the workforce as an emergency medical technician. And that is a great platform. A lot of people think that the only place you can go from there is to become a paramedic and then to work for a fire department or to be on an ambulance. But we have a lot of people who use this as a springboard to discover other pathways that they want to explore. Law enforcement is a lot of EMTs move on to become police officers because they realize that's something that they have a passion about. Nurses doctors, PAs, nurse practitioners, fire investigators. There's all different branches of avenues that people can go out with. But even if they do something totally different, they end up working for a bank, they have that 2 semesters of experience in life-saving techniques that at some level, putting people into the general population who know how to manage some basic bleeding control, who know how to do CPR, it's a benefit to society at large. And so that's one of the unique things about this avenue and this pathway, and working towards a degree in that. And for students who are looking to go into the fire service or to work for an ambulance long term, just speaking to the fire department that I work for, the last hiring that we did was for 12 positions. We had 950 applications. So there are a lot of people, and I don't want to say that to discourage you. What I want to say is encourage you in that this is a popular field that has a lot to offer you as much as you have to offer it. But sitting on a table across from candidates who have come through, I know that as we go through their jacket, looking at their resumes and things before they walk in the room, it always is an encouraging thing to see somebody who has attained their associate's or their bachelor's degree, because what that shows to us on the hiring side is commitment. A student who has stepped onto a certain path, and despite the struggles that we all know go along with being students in a community college and in a four-year university working towards your degree, a person who has shown that dedication and that commitment to attain that, it may not be that, it may be a degree in, we hired an individual who had a degree in Japanese pottery. That is what their degree was from Cal State Long Beach. And we hired them because of the character traits and the service that they brought to their community. But we hired them also because they showed a commitment to something that they were passionate about. And so find your internal passion and find that thing that you want to start working towards, and be able to, that's not just a piece of paper, it's evidence of your ability to rise above.
I just want to quickly say, I know we don't have much time, but with social justice courses specifically, I think one of the draws to it is that overall, taking a social justice course or having that as your or majoring in it, it's just going to help make the world a more equitable and just world, regardless of what field you go into. If you like major in it and continue in that pathway, or if you go any of the other pathways, just having a course in social justice or just an AA in social justice, I think it will help us sort of reach a point in our society that we want to see, one that's more equitable, inclusive, and diverse. So just want to add that in there because I know we're probably going to have some student questions.
Yes, I'd like to open the floor up to students. Do any of you have any questions? You can either put them in the chat box, or if you'd like to raise your hand, we would love to hear from you. Okay, I see iPhone 3.
Hi, sorry, I thought it said my name. I'm Lachey. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Okay. So
Yeah.
my question, my major is child development, but I'm really into, I just love kids, but I've also, I don't want to say bad kids, but I've always picked up on being around the kids that have like, the more of the issues in school and the problems. So I want to know, with psychology, is there a field that deals with kids that I can go to schools and talk to kids? You know how they have kids at school that just have issues at home and different things like that? Is there a field, or what would that be for me to kind of step into that field? Because I wanted to do something that had to do with psychology, but I want to work with kids. If that made sense. I'm sorry. It was
No, it totally makes sense. So first of all, I'll just give you kind of a short answer here, but happy to talk to you more about it in more detail outside of this venue. There's kind of two pathways. If you want a career in psychology in which you help kids in a more systematic way, in which you're doing therapy, in which you're doing counseling, you're looking at at least a master's degree in psychology, right? And you would get a master's degree in clinical psychology, or you could get your social work degree. Social work is a bit of a misunderstood profession. Let me just quickly say that about 40% of all social workers do counseling. They do talking therapy. So you can also get a social work degree. But you could also do advocacy and volunteer work, in which you do it in very informally. Like if you go into schools and you're doing something that's much more of a volunteer, where you're generally doing an outreach type program. That's not a career or a profession. That would be something you would do volunteer through some kind of agency or organization or the school system. But if you really want to help kids, like sitting in a room one-on-one, going through the issues that they have and providing structure and support, that's more of a counseling or a therapy type profession. And that involves at least the master's degree in social work or the master's degree in clinical psychology. And if you get your degree in clinical psychology, you can choose the group that you work with, like you can specialize in a certain group. So you can specialize in children's disorders and children's issues. You can specialize in eating disorders. You can specialize in psychotic disorders, whatever you choose. So if you wanted to specialize in children's disorders, you could. But in looking at just what you had to say right now, 2 pathways: you either do volunteer and advocacy, which is generally not paid, and it's through the school system or some kind of volunteer agency, or you go into the clinical profession of psychology, which requires a master's degree. I don't know if that answered your question, but I'm always happy to answer questions if you want to reach out to me at another time through email or through the phone, and we can talk more about it.
Yes, what's your email?
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. And it did help me a lot. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question for Professor Stapleton. So Marwa says, I wanted to thank you all for your time, and I wanted to ask Professor Stapleton how he was able to transition from political science to his field and how he went about it. Thank you.
And Mara, that was a great question. I was actually in the middle of typing a response to all of you, but I'll just say it real quick. So for me, getting in the pre-hospital emergency field was not my goal. I was early on in a pathway to political science and international law. My goal was to be the ambassador to Japan. That was my goal because of my upbringing. I graduated from a Japanese high school, was overseas for 8 years during my formidable teenage years. So that was my pathway. But political science just didn't hold on to me the way that I thought it was going to. And I didn't really realize that until I ended up with this job just to get me through college, working on an ambulance. My sister was going through medical school at Loma Linda University at the time. And we were in the car with her fiance, and we were going somewhere, and her and I were going back and forth talking about different patient experiences and this symptom and that symptom. And my now brother-in-law, her fiance at the time, said, Josh, you're a political science major, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, for a poli-sci major, I hear you talking about medicine all the time, but I've never heard you talk politics. And that was when the light bulb went off. And I realized that I'm passionate about something different than I thought I was going to be passionate about. And that was when I literally just went to my counselor at Cal State San Bernardino and said, I'm changing majors and I don't know how to do it. And I became a biology major thinking I was going to go down the medical school route. Well, watching my sister go through that, I knew that was not something I wanted to do. She worked very hard at what she has become, but exposing yourself to just different things that are out there in the public service field. You've chosen this pathway because you want to serve others. Be aware that there are so many different ways you can go about doing that. And that very well may still be the political science route. You might end up finding your passion and your joy in that, but you also might find something that you didn't anticipate finding, which is a different calling than you might think you're on right now. So I wish you the best in that.
Thank you. Looks like we have a question for Professor Moronez. So it says, What would you suggest for someone like me, and this is from Samantha, who's trying to bridge the gap between criminal justice and social justice? I've always been interested in the ability to make change in society and in policy making. So I'm torn on which path to take, and any advice would be amazing. I also wanted to say I attended your presentation yesterday via Zoom, and it was really awesome. I wasn't able to stay through the end, but it brought me pride as a woman. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And the question in terms of bridging the gap between criminal justice and social justice, I think that's already happening. And it's actually really beautiful to see that if you major in social justice, I think there are so many pathways that you can go in terms of criminal justice specifically. So looking at corrections, parole, the probation system, law enforcement, rehabilitation services or reentry services for folks who are formerly incarcerated and are getting out of the system, employment skills for those individuals, just life skills building, education on the inside and on the outside. So something that I do is I teach at the prisons here. I teach at the prisons on the California Institution for Women and California Institution for Men in Chino, and I teach courses inside the prison. You could also do something related to housing for formerly incarcerated people. There's so many things that you can do with a social justice emphasis that involves the criminal justice system, and I think that can make those services just better for everyone, really. In terms of the path, I would probably, I think either one would work, honestly, but I think maybe someone we could talk to would be Professor Steve Lux. He and I are like always talking about criminal justice and social justice and kind of the types of courses that he teaches here at Chafee, and then the courses that I teach, and we kind of talk about ways in which we can bridge those things together. I think he's a great person to talk to in relation to this. But yeah, I think maybe we could talk a little bit more to see like specifically what type of career within criminal justice or within like system impacted like folks that you want to do. And I think if I know a little bit more specific, then I could probably guide you a little bit better on that, Samantha. But thank you for your question. And thank you so much for the compliment for the women's talk yesterday.
Does anyone have any other questions? I see a lot of thank you for the information. No questions at this time. Just want to make sure we don't miss out on anybody. I'm going to share a link to my YouTube channel. It has recordings of other PCS panels that I've done, because some of you have mentioned being in child development. So there's some that are focused on that in case you want to check out any of those past panels. If the panelists wouldn't mind, would you be okay? I know Professor Sadowski already did, but would you be okay sharing your email or contact information in case students have follow-up questions for you later? Okay, I don't see any more hands up. So thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you to all the students who have attended. I hope that this was something that was valuable for you. I feel like there's a lot of great information that was shared. I will put my email in there in case anybody has any questions for me. So thank you again. I hope you all have a great sunny weekend. Bye.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Josh, you can use this for an hour of flexible flex time if you need
Oh,
that.
perfect.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. I
should email
appreciate it very
Jessica
much.
about that too.
Right on. Awesome. Thanks, Allison. Anytime
Yeah.
you need me, glad to be here.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Take care. We'll see you.